Good morning, and thank you for joining me again for what will be our final devotional in Paul's letter to the Colossians. And we're in chapter 4, and the rest of the chapter really are the concluding remarks and greetings that are being sent. But I just wanted to focus on two verses, on verse 12 and 13. Let's read. Epaphras, who is one of you, a bondservant of Christ, greets you, always labouring fervently for you in prayers, that you may stand perfect and complete in all the will of God. For I bear him witness that he has a great zeal for you and those who are in Laodicea and those in Hierapolis. Epaphras, you may recall that Paul mentioned Epaphras earlier on in the letter in chapter 1, and it was Epaphras who originally took the gospel to Colossae. He was from Colossae apparently, and he took the gospel to Colossae, and maybe he was the one that established the church there. And he also is the one that went to visit Paul in prison in Rome. And so I just want us to think about this guy Epaphras. Look how Paul describes him. He says, who is one of you, a bondservant of Christ. Now Paul described himself as a bondservant of Christ. And what he meant by that basically is that he had surrendered all his rights. He basically surrendered his whole life over to Christ, in the service of Christ. It's the same word that is used for a slave that was of the slave class. And of course the slave class, they had no rights in that world. But he is a person who has laid down his whole life. He's decided that he will serve God with all of his heart and all of his life. It says that he's always labouring fervently for you in prayers. And I think it's always important to look at these and consider what's being said, because very often we'll separate, prayer from work, from labour, but actually he's bringing the two together, the two thoughts together, that he as Epaphras is clearly a man of prayer, and he labours, he works in prayer, if you like, always interceding for these Colossians. Of course, in the light of the situation they were facing, where there was false teaching, you can imagine how troubled he was, just as Paul was deeply troubled, and it was encouraging them not to fall into the trap of these false teachings. And so prayer is so important. It's so important, not just individually, but it's important that we're praying for one another. We're important that we're praying for our leaders and for our congregation, the church that we belong to. Always labouring fervently in prayer, that you may stand perfect and complete in all the will of God. And when I think about completeness and perfection, I think about maturity. So he's praying that they might be mature in the face of this opposition, in the face of this onslaught of the evil one, of the devil through these false teachings, that these believers will stand firm, that they'll be mature, that they'll be grounded, rooted and grounded. He goes on to say in verse 13, he says, for I bear him witness that he has a great zeal for you and those who are in Laodicea and those in Hierapolis. And again, we just see this man's heart. We see his heart for the people of God. Firstly, his heart for God, in that he is a bondservant, but that also his heart, his genuine love and concern for all the believers, all his brothers and sisters in Christ, that they might also move on to maturity. And I just think that stands as an example for us. It should help us, guide us in our own prayers. We're all on this journey, and we all need to find a place of maturity. But also as a congregation, as a church, as the people of God, that we will grow and that will withstand the schemes of the evil one. So often he's so subtle. It comes in so subtly, doesn't it? But that we might have the maturity and the discernment to discern between truth and error and to stand firm in Christ, because in Christ we have all that we need. He is sufficient. He is sufficient for you and for me in everything that we need. So again, we're bringing this letter to an end. The rest of it really, as I've said, is just concluding remarks. But I just hope you've been blessed as we've kind of worked our way through the letter, verse by verse. There's been much to ponder, much has challenged us. And so let us seek to go on with Christ. Let us seek to go on to maturity in Christ. And just like these first century Colossian believers, that will stand firm in the truth of Jesus Christ. May the Lord bless you. Have a wonderful day.